Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Izuku falls in love with pixie-bob, part 1. I don't own this fanfic, and also make sure to check out the author of this fanfic, MosesArk Reborn2000, and support him for writing this awesome fanfic, link is in the description. Let's begin the story. Late afternoon somewhere in the boonies. Here they come. Pixie-bob called out as she along with Kota, Aizawa, and Mandalay stood outside their main building, the setting sun still giving them some light. It sure took them a while to get here. Mandalay said to Aizawa as they watched slowly but surely the students of Wana made their way out of the tree line into the clearing, all of them showing clear signs of having gone through an exhausting and taxing exercise, from how Iida was dragging a leg to how Kaminari showed signs of nearly shorting out his brain again. What the hell did you mean 3 hours? Sierra yelled out in anger and exhaustion as they all came into the clearing where most of the class collapsed or fell to their knees. Sorry about that was the time it would have taken us to finish it. Mandalay apologized, even if she knew that it didn't sound like a genuine one. You used that entire mess just to boast on how much better you are. That's not right. Sato asked back, as it took them over twice that time with well over 5 the amount of pros present. I don't care. I'm so hungry I could eat a horse right now. Kirishima butted in as he held his gut. Like the rest of them, they had only had breakfast, and now that they didn't make it back in the time given, they will miss lunch even if they all knew that they would still be having dinner soon. Still, I thought it would have taken longer for you guys to get here. You didn't have as hard a time dealing with my earth beasts as I thought you would. Pixie-bob said, as when they realized their mistake with the time window, they still thought it would take them another hour to get here, so in a way, they did meet their expectations. You guys were great. She went on after she giggled into her cat-paw-gloved hands as she looked over all of them, her gaze especially sharp when it met over the boys, but they were all too tired to notice as her eyes landed on 4 of one in particular. You 4. Each of you was able to make use of your talents and experience to overcome hesitation. She pointed out as she had seen how Bakugo, Todoroki, Iida and Midoriya had rushed in with a clear plan. Sure, she was expecting something like that from Iida and Todoroki given their families, but she lucked on the looks department. Iida looked like the handsome devil of a brother she hoped he would get well soon, while Todoroki had all the positives of his father minus the glare and unpleasant demeanor. Bakugo was a looker in his own right and knew what he wanted and wasn't afraid to tell you that, but was a clear bad boy and therefore not her type. She had gone through that phase already, while Midoriya was like a little kitten, sweet and pure, but had the speed of a cheetah and the strength of a lion. But such a fine selection to choose from, could you blame her for her next actions? Yes you could. I'm looking forward to seeing the strapping men you all become in 3 years. I call dibs. Pixie shot towards them and started frowning over the tired and surprised teens as they tried to get her to back off, while the sight itself confused their classmates to the point all their brains had to reboot. What the hell is this? Get away from me. You crazy cat lady. Hold one, Pixie-bob. Mandalay, what exactly am I looking at? Aizawa asked Mandalay, as well his tone hadn't changed. His slight change in facial expression showed that he was starting to reconsider bringing his students to an isolated woodlands area where a very strange cat lived. She's a little desperate since you know she's at that age and hasn't found the one. Mandalay explained to him, though that didn't help his mood, as he had enough stress to deal with when it comes to having to ensure his students didn't let hormones run rampant. Now he has to deal with one of the few adults present being part of the problem. Speaking of age, hearing that comment and putting 2 and 2 together, Midoriya moved to speak, but once again, Pixie-bob covered his face with a weird cat-themed glove, which either gave her a boost to her strength, or she was just this strong naturally, as he could feel the grip. Choose your next words very carefully. Pixie-bob warned him with a hiss, as her eyes practically glowed red. Though for the life of him, he couldn't understand why age was such a big deal to her, as she wasn't a granny-like recovery girl, she was still in the prime of her life, as around 30 or so, extremely beautiful, and because of her years on the job, she was well versed in both theory and practical ways to save people, which he found to be her most attractive feature to the point he didn't even notice her bust size. I don't need any reminders about that now. Meanwhile, in the mind of the blonde pro, she was irritated by the fact both this kitten who was a little less cute after that comment and Mandalay had to bring up her age, and that fact she has been striking out in the realm of romance. She hasn't been on a date with a girl she could see herself going out with for a follow-up date in 2 damn years. 2 years she hadn't had a boyfriend. What god did she offend, as whenever she can find the time to go out, the guys she meets with are either rapid fans that don't respect that pros have personal lives, degenerates, perverts or worse of all, guys that are really nice, but just not her type. And she knew that Mandalay was going to scold her for this later, but it's easy for her to stay calm and professional when you're dating a fire chief. When she was striking out, Sasaki was going out with a sexy foreign firefighter who could pull double duty as a grade A male stripper. It's been bugging me for a while now, but she came back from her depressing thoughts when Midoriya spoke up as he pointed towards Kota. Whose kid is that? Oh, he's not one of ours. He's my cousin's kid. Mandalay answered him while Kota looked at them like they were something he picked off his shoe, which was something pixie-bob was expecting as she released her hold on his face. Come on Kota, greet everyone, you are going to spend the next 3 weeks with them after all. Oh, well, hello Kota. I'm Izuku Midoriya of the UA first year hero course. It's nice to that was a low blow, literally. She knew that he wasn't thrilled to have hero students coming over for most of the summer, but she didn't think he would get physical with him. Midoriya. The younger Iida brother zoomed right past her as he picked up his friend who had fallen to his knees in pain before turning to scold Kota as he walked off. She had a feeling Sasaki is going to have her hands full with her nephew. You brute of a child. What kind of person would punch another man in the scrotum when all he was doing was trying to be civil and introduce himself? Later, Midoriya. Todoroki spoke up as he along with Midoriya and Iida stood away from the group. Yes Todoroki? Something on your mind? Midoriya asked him as it was something of a regular thing after the whole house mess that Todoroki would come to one of them for advice, mostly on stuff he didn't understand due to his sheltered upbringing. Kind of. What was the deal with pixie-bob earlier? Why does she call dibs on us? Todoroki asked them, surprising them at how confused he looked and how they would need to explain that she was like Midnight if Midnight was kinda serious whenever she flirted with them. Oh, well how do I explain this? Midoriya thought aloud as he tried and failed to keep the redness off his face as he recalled the experience. Will we become slaves when we become strapping men? I thought we were training to be heroes. Todoroki added to his question, now looking madder than confused. Todoroki, I can assure you that slavery was not what she was referring to. Iida stepped in to calm him down before he did something rash, though he was struggling to understand how his friend got to that conclusion. But then why call dibs? We'll tell you later. Both Midoriya and Iida said at the same time as Iida turned to clean his glasses while Midoriya found that his feet were very interesting right now. Lucky for them, their clueless friend didn't notice how awkward things were getting due to his questioning. Okay. But I do have another question. Why did she seem to get so mad when Midoriya brought up age? He instead decided to discuss another subject that was puzzling him, and this time around, even Midoriya seemed to be on the same boat. Seeing the two of them confused, Iida, for once, took the lead to try and explain things. Oh, well that's easier to explain. You see, Todoroki, asking a woman's age is considered to be very rude, and in this case, it seems like she took Midoriya bringing up her age as an insult. Iida explained to the two of them. Really? Todoroki asked, looking shocked at such a simple thing being considered rude. Yes, my brother and mother explained that to me when I was younger and asked a stranger how old was turning after she said she was coming back from a birthday party. He'd replied as he recalled how when he was around 7, he just asked some random lady her age, to which his older brother told him to apologize to the lady before taking him home to explain what he had just done. But I didn't ask her about her age. Midoriya said, starting to pale as he realized that he made a grave minor mistake. Yes, but you did bring up the fact she has been an active pro for several years, and after that, when Mandalay brought up the reason she was all over us, Iida coughed into his hand at that part as he went on. You brought up age again. Tensei told me that age with women is always a sensitive subject. Oh man, does that mean I insulted her twice? Midoriya started to panic as he thought back to all their encounters. To his horror, both times he brought up age in a roundabout way which was surely maybe seen as a slight against her. Seems that way. Todoroki was of no help calming his friend down as he just stated what he thought was a fact. Eyes, I need your help. How do I apologize for such rude behavior? Midoriya nearly jumped them as he started to plead for assistance in correcting this mistake. How could he have made such a stupid mistake? Midoriya, I'm sure that she wouldn't be too upset over it, it was an honest mistake. Iida tried to calm him down, as well he could understand his feelings. He was pretty sure that she wasn't holding it against him, as like he said, he never brought it up directly. But I still need to show her that I'm sorry. How can I be a hero when I can't even practice good manners? Midoriya shot back as he started to brainstorm ways to make it up to pixie-bob, but alas, his mind was mainly geared towards hero work, so he had absolutely nothing. Whenever I upset my sister, I would try and make her something. That could work. Todoroki spoke up, offering up some useful information even if he rarely ever spoke with his sister and only ever noticed when he did something major. The point is that it's progress. What should I make then? Midoriya turned to him so fast, it looked like he teleported, but unfazed by this, Todoroki simply said the first thing that came to mind. Soba. At that, Iida butted in, as he caught their attention by coughing into his hand again. The meal is all and good, but she could be on a diet of some kind. The best thing you can do is ask one of the other cats what she would like to ensure no misunderstandings. Iida advised him, as he had heard that even a meal meant as a token could be received poorly if the person receiving it doesn't like the food or can't eat it for some reason or another. Later after dinner and the onsen incident, Tiger Midoriya said to the pro whose back was turned to him. At the sound of his voice, however, the muscular and rather intimidating pro turned to face him. Yes. What is it? Tiger asked him, though he did his best so his rough voice didn't come off as scary as it normally did, nor would for what was planned for their training the next day. I was hoping I could ask for your advice on something. Midoriya, who was wearing some pants and a simple t-shirt as sleepwear, said, as he knew he didn't have much time before their teachers told them it was lights out. Well, lay it on me. I'm here to help you become a better hero in any way that I can. Tiger replied, ready and happy to aid him on whatever he might have an issue on, and even though it was still rather early, he always did like people with both energy and drive. Well, it's not in the traditional hero training, but I can assure you it has something to do with heroics. Midoriya stuttered out, to which this grabbed the pro's attention even more, as he now suspected it was something to do with teenage stuff. That is weird, but I'm still an adult, so I'm sure I can help you with whatever issue you may have. Tiger replied, getting ready for whatever the boy could ask him that they could reasonably discuss. It's about Pixie-bob. Midoriya said, as he turned red and looked down at his feet, not seeing how the pro's eyes widened and lowered, as if this was something that had happened before. Oh boy. Tiger thought to himself. What about her? He asked, already prepared to tell the kid that she wasn't interested and that he should be focusing on their training rather than girls. Well, you see. I was extremely rude earlier today and I might have insulted her age without knowing it. I'm sorry about I don't know what I can do to make it up to her, and I've already spent like the entire of dinner thinking of ways to do just that, but every idea doesn't seem good enough. However, he wasn't prepared for the world vomit that Midoriya would give him as an answer, as he could only pick up the first part before the kid started speaking so fast and softly that he might as well be speaking another language. Was this what Eraserhead was talking about? And what's this about insulting Tsuchikawa? She didn't look like she was upset. Tiger thought to himself, as he had seen his fellow teammate not too long ago when they ate their dinner and didn't pick up any negative emotions from her. Kid, Tiger said, but found that the oi didn't hear him, so he repeated himself. Kid. Okay, it looked like this kid was not even on Earth anymore. Kid. That seemed to do the trick, as the boy jumped almost a full meter in the air from fright before his eyes started to focus on their surroundings again. But Tiger held his hand up to stop him. Alright, thanks for returning from wherever you decided to go, Tiger started, to which the boy blushed up a storm before he continued. What did you even do in the first place? Well, I kinda made light about her age when I brought up how long you guys have been in hero work. Midoriya told him, and from how the boy looked down and held his arm, he believed that he had done something that needed to be punished or was ashamed of. That's it? Tiger asked him, dumbstruck that the boy was freaking out over something so minor. What? And clearly, he didn't see it, as he did so he paused so he could explain it to him. Kid, I'm going to be straight with you. Sure, she's not a teenager anymore, but she knows it and has long accepted that fact. She was most likely just upset about not being lucky in her romantic life is all. Tiger told him, leaving out the really bad parts that she had told him and Shiratoko whenever they hung out when Sasaki wasn't present. Sure, Sasaki was kind and understanding, but she had a steady boyfriend while the rest of them were still single, though in Shiratoko's case, it was more due to the fact she couldn't find anyone that could keep up with her and her endless energy for long. Wait, why would she not be lucky? She's super skilled, she makes the people she helps feel good, and has a job where she saves people on the regular. What's not to like? Midoriya asked him, looking as confused as a newborn child when they saw their reflection in a mirror. To him, the very idea of Tsuchikawa being single was ludicrous, but what caught the pro's attention was the fact that he didn't mention her looks at all, he was solely focused on her other points. I think he's the first guy to not bring up her looks. This kid is something alright. Tiger said in the confines of his mind before he spoke up. Well, let's just say that you're the exception when it comes to your opinions about her. Still, I doubt she let it get to her. She probably forgot all about it before dinner even finished. To this, Midoriya didn't seem to back down, as for once in their entire conversation, he seemed to grow a backbone as he stared him down. Still, it would be rude not to try and make amends for my mistake. The teen told him, his tone giving away that he wouldn't concede on this point. Tiger was able to pick up from this that it didn't matter how major or minor the slight, Midoriya wanted to do something to correct it, which he saw as a good this, as it showed that he was the kind of person that showed how he felt with his actions. Suit yourself, kid, but I'll help. Tiger told him, holding back the smile for nothing else than to stay in the character of drill sergeant he'll be playing for the next 3 weeks. You will? Midoriya asked him, seemingly glowing with optimism at the prospect of his aid, which made him wonder how this 15-year-old could act more childish than the literal child staying with them. I just said that, didn't I? Tiger chuckled before he continued. She's a simple woman when it comes to her taste, so you don't need some song and dance numbers. Try a handwritten letter where you explain yourself and offer up your apology. She likes that kind of stuff, says it's more personal and sincere than emails or texts. He decided to leave out the part where she loved them because of all those old movies where secret and open lovers exchanged such. Thank you, Tiger. I'll do my best to write the best letter I can. Midoriya said as he bowed to him before rushing off as if he was being chased, leaving the pro behind as he wondered about this. That was the weirdest conversation I've ever had with a teenager. He said aloud as he turned to continue towards where he was supposed to start his patrol of the area. Even though next to nobody knew where they were, they couldn't afford to slack off. Did you talk to him? Ida asked him as Midoriya had pulled the two boys aside to tell them what he had learned. Yes, he said that I should write an apology letter. Midoriya nodded as he told them what he had learned. Not what I was expecting given how eccentric she was earlier, but such gestures are known to work, at least according to my mother's shows. Ida replied as he could admit that a letter didn't fit his perception of the pro, but if it came from someone that has worked with her for so long, then it meant that it had to be correct. Are you not going to make a meal along with it? Todoroki asked him, having spent some time thinking on how he could score some of his favorites from this. Well, Tiger didn't say anything about if she was dieting or allergic to anything, so I can still make that meal. Midoriya took a second to think it over, and while Tiger didn't say anything bad, he also didn't say anything good. So he could still make the meal, but just tell her what it is before handing it to her, so if she wants to eat it, she can. I can help with the proportions then. Todoroki stated though he did have the underhanded goal of making him prepare more than he'll need so that he could have some leftovers. Thanks, guys, that means a lot. Midoriya thanked them, to which the two others smiled as they accepted the thanks before Ida looked at his watch and saw the time. You're welcome, Midoriya, but I think we should head inside. We only have 5 more minutes before lights out. Ida reminded them as they all turned to head back to their sleeping quarters for the night. Sure, Aizawa wasn't where they could see him, but they didn't want to give him any reason to be harsh on them. A few days later, finally, I finished it. Midoriya said as he along with Todoroki stood aside. It had been 3 whole days since he started writing the letter, and it was a whole process, as he must have gone through an entire one of the books he packs to record his progress before he finally reached a finished product he was comfortable handing to Pixie-bob. I didn't think it would take you this long. Todoroki admitted as he had no idea that Midoriya would put so much effort into this. Sure, he got that the letter had to be good, but he was thinking it wouldn't take more than a day since there wasn't much to be said to begin with. Well, I just wanted to be sure that it was as good as I could make it. Midoriya replied, completely unashamed of his rather lengthy process as he held the folded paper in his hand. I told you that the 7th through 11th ones you made would be good enough. Todoroki replied as he had been as helpful as the green-haired boy allowed, but he had decided to let him do his own thing when it became clear he wasn't going to stop till he was happy with it. Anyway. Midoriya coughed into his other hand with a mild blush as he moved the subject to something else. We should get started on making that food, right? Todoroki nodded his head. Yes. Did you get the supplies? He asked him as he wanted to make something other than curry, which was a sentiment most of them shared, as their improvements aside, they wanted something different. Deku, are you okay? Out of nowhere, a certain brunette appeared, scaring the hell out of Midoriya. Uraraka. I don't see why you're so jumpy right now. Todoroki on the other hand was as composed as usual as he just looked to his side as Uraraka walked up to them. Sorry about that. I'm starting to think I have a rabbit's heart like my mother. Midoriya replied as he messaged his chest, wondering how his mother lived so long without any cardio issues when she was even jumpier than him. But I thought you said her quirk was an emitter class. Todoroki asked him as he blinked in surprise, to which Uraraka only giggled at his lack of understanding. I think he means that he gets his jumpy nature from her, like a scared rabbit. She explained to him, to which he nodded his head after taking a moment to think about why that made more sense. Oh, okay. I'll leave you to do it. Todoroki said as he turned to leave. Letting the two of them settle things without him there. You didn't answer the question, Deku. You've been distracted these last few days. Something on your mind? Uraraka asked him, her smile vanishing as the concern started to shine through as she had been wondering as to what had been on his mind for so long. Sure, he still trained as hard as the rest of them, but she could see that his head wasn't in it as much as it normally was. Oh, it's nothing. Just been worrying on how to improve my quirk without going too far by mistake. Midoriya said to try and explain himself as he waved his hands around, glad that he managed to get the letter into his back pocket before she could see it. Uraraka took his answer, and while she didn't immediately buy it, she did seem to see that it wasn't a lie. "Oh yeah, if you break your fingers this time around, they'll have to send you to the hospital," Uraraka said, as he copied his finger flick thing, but for obvious reasons, didn't hurt herself, as he nodded his head, happy she seemed to buy it. "Yeah, and she already told me if I did hurt myself like that, she wouldn't heal me," he told her, as he recalled what the old lady had told him and All Might after his fight with Todoroki at the sports festival. It was the reason why All Might recommended him to his old teacher, as he didn't seem fit to get Midoriya to a point where he could make use of Ofa without injuring himself in the process. "Yikes, you think she was serious?" Uraraka blinked at that. "I don't want to find out," Midoriya answered, as though she would still help if his life was in danger, but if it was something like a broken finger, arm or leg, she seemed more likely to honor that threat, which would mean he would miss precious time training. "So you're okay?" Asui asked, as she appeared much like Uraraka did, out of nowhere, and this time, he wasn't the only one to jump in fright. "Asui, when did you get here?" Midoriya asked the frog girl who simply let her head fall to the side. "Call me Tsu, and I just got here, but I did notice that you've been acting strange lately. Is it because of the letter for pixie-bob you've been stressing over?" And in her usual style, Asui was straight to the point as she told him her reasoning for being there. "Letter?" Uraraka repeated. This was the first she was hearing of this, and it seemed to be a big thing based on how Midoriya seemed to be scared by her learning of this letter to pixie-bob. Why did she suddenly have the urge to skin a blonde cat? "Who told you that? What letter?" Midoriya, never one to be good at creating lies on his feet, didn't even bother, as he just wanted to know who leaked. In response, Asui pointed towards Todoroki, who seemed to be in a conversation with Hananuki. "Todoroki did. I asked him first why you were acting odd, and he was hanging out around Iida." Asui told him, as it hadn't been hard to get him to talk, mainly because Midoriya never actually told them not to talk about this, he had simply implied so, and while Iida got that, their dual quirk user didn't. "Wait, why is Deku writing a letter to pixie-bob?" Uraraka jumped right back in before her mind went to some dark places. Surely there was a sensible reason for why her, not crush for writing a letter to an attractive confident older woman, who may or may not think he was prime man MEAT Mina's words, not hers. "Hero, he's writing an apology letter to pixie-bob because he thinks he upset her when he brought up her age in a roundabout way." Before Midoriya could even think of an answer to save himself from a Uraraka who was developing this scary aura, Asui did it for him by being truthful. That proved to be enough, as if it was never there, that aura vanished, as Uraraka's subtle demeanor switched back to her normal one. "Oh, well, that's okay. But why were you hiding it then?" Uraraka asked him, as she bobbed her head to the side, as Midoriya rubbed the back of his head in slight embarrassment and relief that she didn't seem to react negatively, though he had no clue as to why she would in the first place. "Because I didn't want people finding out about it before I even finished it," Midoriya answered, as the last thing he wanted for the entire camp to learn about this. He loved that his classmates would most likely try to help, but they could too much sometimes. "You could just be direct with her and tell her, you know," Asui told him, a point he had to concede to. "Yeah, but when I asked Tiger for advice, he said that she prefers this kind of stuff, so I wanted to be sure it was perfect," Midoriya told them, as he already got advice from a credible source. "So, did you?" Uraraka asked, seeming to be much more involved in this, as he pulled the letter out, but he didn't let them read it, even when Uraraka reached for it. "Yeah. I finished it just before breakfast. I'm going to add a meal to it as well," Midoriya told them, as he was waiting for the perfect time. "Hero, wait, is that why we're making soba?" Asui asked him, to which he nodded his head. "I was wondering why we're voted to make Todoroki's favorite food." Wait, that was news to him. "Wait, I thought it was because we got sick and tired of curry," Uraraka asked, as they had done a quick vote, and while everyone had voted for their meals, cold soba had won out with 3 votes. "No, I'm starting to think it's because Todoroki tricked me and Iida to vote on his idea," Midoriya said to himself, as he felt like he had just been done dirty by someone he saw as a friend. He may not be the sharpest tool when it comes to social interactions, but he is still one of the smartest people in our class, Asui reminded them. "But it can't be that bad, I mean Todoroki doesn't seem to be someone with bad tastes. After dinner, I'll be back, guys," Tsuchikawa said to the rest of the cats as she got up from the table where they had finished eating dinner. The sun had long since gone down, and with Koda already in bed, they had finally had time to eat their own food. "Are you covering for Vlad tonight?" Chitara asked her, to which she laughed it off, as the man had asked, but she refused. "Not even. I'm heading to the hot springs. I don't know about you 3, but helping these students train leaves mama needing a soak to relax her muscles," she replied, as she wanted to have a nice long soak. "Just remember not to overdo it, we don't need the students seeing you look as old as you feel," Shiratoko told her with a laugh that she never ran out of energy. At her words with the added chuckles from the rest of the cats, the image of her old and wrinkly future shot through her mind which she aggressively ripped to shreds. She was 18 at heart, damn it. Watch it, you caffeine-addicted cat. Tsuchikawa yelled back as she held her hands out as if she had actual claws, even if she had taken them off like the rest of them to enjoy their meal. She's right, Shiratoko. That was very rude. I'm sure she'll find the right one. Leave it to Sasaki to be the voice of reason, but before she could get too comfortable, she added with her laugh. At the next bingo game. Screw you guys, I'm going to the hot springs. Tsuchikawa told them as she flipped them off before pointing towards the door she quickly walked out of. 20 minutes later, I can't believe I couldn't find her. Midoriya thought to himself with an air of depression about him. He had eaten his food as quickly as he could before snagging another bowl and getting off. Monoma tried to make something of it, but he was gone before he could get a word out. Now he had barely any more time left before he would be required to head back to their dorms, and all he had to show for it was a cold bowl of food, an unread letter, and the chill night air. I only have 5 more minutes before the lights out. He thought to himself as he walked by the hot spring area and noted the time displayed by a clock on the wall. By now the baths had been closed for a bit, something about not letting them have someone to get to without supervision, or getting up to something stupid. That last part must have been Izawa. I might as well turn in for the night, the food's cold anyway. He decided with a heavy sigh as he decided to take a shortcut through the hot spring area to make it back with time to spare. But as he walked by them, he picked up the sound of water splashing around. Is someone there? He asked himself as he moved to investigate, not realizing that he was heading towards the section that was sectioned off for the GIRLS. They never installed signs as its private property. He saw that the cloth that served as the door was caught on something and still open, but no one in their right mind would leave it as is. No way, the entrance is still open. He found himself speechless as he could see that there was indeed someone present, but it wasn't one of the students. Through the mist, he could make out the shape of Pixie-bob in all her naked glory as she poured some hot water over herself. While his brain was able to register that he must have walked into the girl's side before it had to perform a hard shutdown, his primitive monkey brain was still very much active. This was why in his state, he was able to trace the path of one drop of water as it worked its way through her golden hair, past her closed eyes, and along the bridge of her nose, and over her soft and very much kissable looking lips, and landing right on her right breast, where it worked its way to her light pink nipple. From there it went down her flat fat-free midsection, tracing lines over her barely visible but hard-earned muscles before disappearing from view as it got to her unseen nether regions. She's a goddess. Midoriya found himself muttering as his face lit up like endeavors whenever angered, while he found that his pants felt extremely uncomfortable due to the hard-on he had going. However, that was the feeling that got his brain to reboot as he jumped away from there, nearly landing on his butt and dropping the bowl of cold soba. What am I doing? What am I thinking? I just peeked into the girls' baths. Not even Mineta got that far. Oh god, I'm worse than Mineta. Midoriya found himself yelling in his mind, as while Mineta had tried and failed at it, he had succeeded unknowingly it may be. How could he ever stand to look his female classmates in the eye again, his mother, All Might? But that terror came another. What if he had been spotted? Did she see me? No. She would have said something if she thought she was being watched, right? He thought to himself, his mind jumping to the possible conclusion that she did see him and was okay with it, but he shook that thought clear before it could take root. Bet it together, Izuku, of course, she would have let you know by having the barrier of Swallow Me Whole. He thought to himself as he made the sensible choice and got out of there, no need to push his luck further than the universe already decided to give him with. Oh yeah, this is what Mama ordered. Meanwhile, as he made his exit, Tsuchikawa relaxed neck deep into the water and took a long and relaxing breath of air. And with the kitten put to bed, I don't have to worry about sharing. She thought to herself with her smile, as while she liked to think she was young like them, she knew for a fact she had a sexier body than those teens did, the joys of finishing puberty of years of healthy living. Even that yaoi Rozu girl who was stacked for a girl her age couldn't compare. Beautiful sky tonight. I'll find him soon, right? Mr. Right. But her mind went from that to another issue where she was losing ground, and that was her romantic life. Honestly, this was the first time that she found herself wondering if maybe one of the guys she turned down for not being her image of the one really was the one and she was simply aiming too high. Her parents said they settled but never revealed as to who was the settler and who was settled, but she was betting it was her dad. She got her looks from him and she was drop dead gorgeous. Or maybe I should just cave and get a cat. That was a depressing thought as she knew that she so much as looked up local shelters, the others would pounce on that. But it seemed like something else was afoot as she felt the cold breeze which should be impossible, so she looked to the side and noticed the flap was open. That's strange, did I leave the entrance open? She asked herself as she stepped out of the bath and grabbed her towel, wrapping it around herself as she stepped toward the way and indeed saw that it was open, but at this time of night, the only ones who could have been awake would be the teachers and the other cats who should be nowhere near here. Oh well, good thing no one was around then. I do not feel like giving anyone a show. She shrugged her shoulders at the amusing thought of one of them seeing her in the nude. She wondered if Vlad was as hot-blooded as he sounded. Well, she was pretty sure Azawa would have just alerted her to his presence with that bored face of his. 2 days later, hero, I'm worried about him. He's been acting strange, well stranger than usual. Asui voiced her concern to the rest of the dubbed Midori Squad. Mina insisted on that. It was nearing dinner time, and while they had finished preparing the food, they had given themselves time to clean up before they ate, which they were using to discuss something. I do too. But he won't tell us what got to him. He just starts muttering to himself. Iida added as he fixed his glasses, along with the rest of the group tuning to see Midoriya seated up against a tree, looking like a man heading to the gallows. Is it something along the lines of he must repent? Uraraka asked him, to which they all nodded their heads, having heard something similar whenever one of them got close enough. Did he and Shiozaki have a fight or something? I asked her, and she didn't even notice his behavior, and she says that they have never had a conversation before or interacted. Todoroki replied, as he had thought she and him and got into some kind of argument, but it seemed like it wasn't the case, as she didn't even notice that he was acting off to begin with. But then what could Deku have done to feel like he needs to be punished? Uraraka asked the group. Did pixie-bob not accept his sorry note? That could be a possible reason, but Iida shook his head. Not that I know. We asked him about it, but he stonewalled us. Iida replied, as he had tried to approach him about it, but had always managed to change the subject to wiggle his way out of answering, though he did always get this mad blush on his face at the same time. I saw that he still had the letter and the plate when he came up from going to look for her. Maybe he couldn't give it to her. Todoroki was still awake when Midoriya had finally made it back, and he saw that he still had it, but he did seem rather distracted by something. So now that he hasn't apologized for a little slight, he's gone down the guilt rabbit hole. Asui guessed, as they all looked towards their rather pitiful-looking friend. Midoriya has always been someone who wore his emotions on his sleeves. Iida thought aloud, as that seemed like the most likely thing here. And he tends to cry a lot. Todoroki gave a different version of that, to which Uraraka tried, but failed to deny. Deku doesn't cry, okay he does, but he's getting better. Uraraka gave up, as she knew her not crush was rather emotional, but he hadn't broken out into tears in a while. I do too. Now let's get back to the group. Shiozaki wanted us to do some readings to pass the time. Iida spoke, as they all started to head back towards the main group. You mean from her Bible? Todoroki asked. He didn't have anything against it, but he hadn't had time for anything other than training for the longest time. He couldn't even recall if he had ever been to a shrine or the like before. No, actually, she brought along some books she wanted to share. Uraraka shook her head as she overheard the girl talking with Kendo about it. Apparently, she was a big bookworm. The next day, Midoriya came here for a minute. Aizawa called out to his problem child. Hearing his name, Midoriya paused in his training routine and rushed on over, going past everyone else as they worked on improving their quicks, as he could spot explosions in the distance, along with Bakugo cursing with each one, while Iida zoomed all over the place. Yes sir? He asked as he wiped the sweat off his brow as he reached his teacher, who looked him over and spotted the bruises he had going for him, but didn't ask. The teachers talked about it and found it would be better if you trained with your quirk rather than your body. So you'll be sent further away from anyone today. Aizawa explained to him, to which he found himself happy for the distraction, as he had found it hard to focus whenever he caught sight of pixie-bob, which had led to more than a couple of accidents during training, as his bruises showed. In the woods by myself sir? Midoriya asked, hoping for some solo training, as he needed some good fortune. No, pixie-bob will be going with you, since she can quickly create monsters for you to practice on. And with that, he felt his body stiffen as he realized that the universe was in no giving mood. But pixie-bob, he peeped out as he unknowingly started to blush a bit, but lucky or unlucky depending on how you ask, Aizawa merely wrote it off as the boy's usual lack of confidence showed itself. Is there a problem with that? He asked him, waiting for him to try and get out of it without a logical reason, which Midoriya did not have, as he merely bowed his head and sucked it up. None. Good, she'll be here any. Aizawa nodded his head, but before he could even finish the sentence, pixie-bob appeared right behind the boy, scaring the hell out of him, while Aizawa only raised a single eyebrow at the sight. Who's ready for some quality time with me? Pixie-bob asked him with a beaming smile on her face and her hands on her hips. Though she was wearing her hero costume, Midoriya still felt his gaze drawn to her thighs and stomach before he broke it off, lucky that neither adult noticed. Well, she's here so my work is done. You're going to work with her for around 3 hours, use that time wisely. Azawa told them as he turned to walk off to go whatever he was doing for the camp, leaving the poor lad alone with the source of his fear and arousal. "Come along, my green-haired kitten. We're burning daylight." And if things couldn't get any worse, as pixie-bob led him off, he was damn sure she was putting extra sway into her tail attachment, which in turn drew his eyes towards her skirt-wearing ass. "Why yes, ma'am," he whispered like a church mouse as he swallowed and moved to follow away. "Why does the universe hate me?" he thought to himself as he and the older woman disappeared into the woods where only Ragdoll could keep an eye on them, but knowing his luck, her attention was elsewhere right now. They walked for around a few minutes, but Midoriya, it felt like years, as the shadows made by the leaves and branches, along with specks of daylight here and there may have felt calming to others, but all he could do was do his damnedest to not focus on the blonde bombshell leading him into the woods like a seductive feline. It didn't help that ever since he saw her bathing, his nights have been filled with one of two kinds of nightmares, both of which involved a different take on that night's events. The first one was the second scariest to him, as it involved her noticing his evil and perverted peeping, calling him out for it, which always meant that the others would show up and see it, from which she would humiliate him in the eyes of his friends and teachers. That one always ended with him being kicked out of UA, losing one for all, as All Might spat in his mouth, ashamed that he made the wrong choice, and him living the rest of his days as a sad sack champ of a hobo with no one to love him. The second and the most frightening nightmare goes along the lines of pixie-bob noticing him, but rather than being angry, she gives a look that would make Midnight look like a nun, as she beckons him into the baths where she would show him more pleasures of the flesh that he knew possible. That was the scariest, as he didn't know why he had such a notion in his end. To begin with, he never had such thoughts before, with his version of a good dream involving girls always being something like just going on a nice date with someone who didn't care if he was quirkless or that he was chasing an impossible dream. Either way, the two of them broke free of the trees and entered another clearing, this one smaller than the others he had seen. "Alright, this should be good enough, unless you learn some new ranged attack," pixie-bob asked him, half serious, as she had heard from Azawa that the boy's quirk was an odd one to be sure, going from only gaining it at 15 to breaking bones whenever he used to it, somehow learning how to regulate it, all within the time of a single school semester. "No ma'am, it's the same as yesterday," Midori replied as soundly as he could, trying his best to keep his head in the here and now. "Good, here's how we're going to have some fun together," pixie-bob started, not knowing why his face was so red, but finding it adorable nonetheless as she turned to face the clearing. "I'm going to use my quickness to create as many monsters as I can control and have you attack them. Your job is to clear as many of them as you can in 5 minutes, sounds easy enough?" she asked him, as the training plan they came up with was simple, but should work well, as Azawa noted that he heard the boy say something about his new form only being 5% of his total output. Knowing the sleep-deprived cat lover, he would most likely want to see him push that limit to at least 10% by the end of the camp, and going from how far he had come since starting at UA, she didn't think it unreasonable. "I can do that." Midoriya, hearing that he wouldn't be fighting or interacting with her, felt some relief, as it meant he had something else to focus on. But that thought faded when pixie-bob gave him a smirk that spelled out trouble, as she quickly dropped to one knee and placed both hands onto the ground. "Good, because the clock already started," she told him, as she used her quirk to create about a dozen earth monsters, different to the ones she had created for his class to fight when they arrived, these being both smaller, but also faster, and more of a threat in a fight. Seeing that she wasn't playing around, Midoriya quickly powered up Ofa and entered full cowling before he was off. Jumping, diving, and weaving around the monsters in a style fusion of Bakugo's aerial mobility and Gran Torino's mastery of 3D combat. Sure, they landed a few hits here and there, but his attacks were much stronger, some of which managed to take down a monster with a single blow. So focused was he on his training that he completely forgot that pixie-bob was not only watching him, but that she was present in the first place, and while she created more and more monsters for him to fight, she didn't let that stop her from observing him and his movements. Finding herself impressed that the stuttering ball of nerves could repress such urges and let loose. "He's good. Really good head on his shoulders, and know how to fight," she thought to herself, as she kept careful count in her head of how much time was going by. Despite the confidence thing. He acts like a scared kitty. That thought, she could admit she found it funny and oddly appealing, but that could be because she didn't have to worry as much about letting his hormones control him like the rest of his classmates. "Alright, so far he can take out around 35 of them in 5 minutes, as an average, let's see if we can't speed that up," she concluded, as she found his performance to be exceptional for their first hour together, but Azawa wanted plus ultra, so she was going to give him plus ultra. As she created another batch of monsters, she made some alterations to them to help increase the difficulty. As she did so, she let out a little giggle which, not known to her, proved to be enough to knock Midoriya out of his zone and wide open for the haymaker that sent him headfirst into a tree. "Midoriya." Seeing him crash like that, Pixie-bob immediately moved to action as she released her quick and let the earth monsters fall apart as she rushed over to him and checked him over, making sure to keep his head elevated on her lap as she checked him over for any injuries. "Can you hear me? How many fingers am I holding?" She didn't find anything out of place for any blood, so she moved to his cognitive functions, as a blow like that must have left something. She felt that she was proven right when Midoriya rose to his feet like a zombie when he realized that she was letting him use her lap as a pillow before turning around on his heel and falling to his knees before his head met the ground as he bowed down low to her. "I can't take it anymore, I can't lie to myself and act like I don't need to be punished." Midoriya practically yelled out as tears started to form in his eyes and fall into the dirt below. "Midoriya, what are you talking about? It's not an issue if you hurt yourself, if you need to rest, we can rest." Pixie-bob told him as calmly as she could as she started to think that he had something wrong with his head after that hit. He wasn't making any sense. "No, it's not that." Midoriya viciously shook his head in denial to them, and while she was still pretty sure that he needed to get examined, she felt in some part of her that there was more going on, so she got closer and gently guided him to look towards her as she placed her hands on his shoulders and moved them about to try and calm him down with a friendly touch. "What's the matter then?" she asked him, keeping a pleasant and calming smile on her face as she wiped the tears out of his eyes, not any differently than Mandalay and the rest of them had done with Kota whenever he heard himself, even if he always went right back to his confused, angry self soon after. "I'm so sorry," Midoriya told her as he did his best to compose him as she worked to keep him from breaking out in tears. "Why are you sorry, kitten? It's not your fault that you got hurt, it's training," she told him as she didn't think he would take such a little setback too hard, but she had known people like that both in her time as a hero student and out in the field. Ragdoll specifically hated sitting still or idleness, and when she wasn't working, training, she was doing a shit ton of the paperwork that came with running their operations. "Because I intruded on your privacy," he muttered as she looked away from her, not feeling like he deserved to gaze at her, and while she was intrigued at his confession, she put that aside as she placed a hand on his cheek, still dirty from the sweat, tears, and dirt, before she moved him closer to the point where the two were hugging one another while they sat there on there, but Midoriya reluctantly gripping onto her as if he was scared she would reject him. "Explain. Now." Though her words sounded harsh, she spoke them with a gentle whisper into his ear, and with that little nudge, the dam broke as he told her everything. He started from how he realized that he needed to apologize to her to how he wrote the letter and made a little meal and went looking for her, only to be walking on by the hot springs when she was in and not realizing that it was the girl's side. He looked inside and saw her. He was clearly ashamed and full of guilt at the admittance that it had accidentally peeked on her while she was in the nude. In his muttering and rambling, he also revealed that he starved for quite a while before his disgust at such actions came surging forth and compelled him to get away from there as fast as he could. That same self-loathing was front and center as he told her of the kind of thoughts he had been having, and no matter how much tried, he couldn't get the image of her out of his dreams. "So he was there that night and he saw me naked." Hearing all of this, Tsuchikawa was stunned, to say the least, her body moving on autopilot as it worked to soothe him. At this point in her life, the act of comforting someone else all but second nature due to years on the job. Even so, she felt a swell of feelings and thoughts, of course, though at the information being shared with her. The appreciation that he felt bad for offending her as she had forgotten all about that, so the fact that he felt that he needed to make things right and went to such lengths was pretty nice of him. Rage came next at the fact that he was a peeping Tom, accident or no, embarrassment that he was the first man to see her naked in 8 years. Understanding and that she could see that it wasn't his intention that night to peep on anyone, and in the fact she left the entrance ajar, which in hindsight was just asking for it, as it could have been anyone else like that Prev Mineta who definitely wouldn't have felt bad and might have tried something like take pics. Sympathy and approval that he had been so beaten up about it, where she was sure the other boys would have just seen it as a lucky break for them to get some happy fun time material, so she felt like this was a testament of his character and also something of a punishment that he'd been dealing with for some time now. And lastly, a boost in self-confidence, as in his state of just letting his mind free, he freely admitted not only to the wet dreams, but to the fact he saw her as the most beautiful woman on the planet besides his mother, but not like that. "Midoriya, calm down." Pixie-bob softly started as she began to coax him out of the rut he had found himself in as she moved him so that they were eye to eye with each other. "I'm going to say this once, so listen carefully. I'm not mad at you," she told him, not raising her voice, but still being firm. "Why you're not?" Midoriya asked her, looking like a lost kitten with how wide-eyed he was, honestly, as sweet as one of Ragdoll's morning energy potions she cooked up, but she wasn't focusing on that as she merely wiped the tears from his eyes with her thumbs. "Well, not as much as you probably think I am, but it was an accident." An embarrassing accident, but an accident nonetheless. You weren't trying to peek into the girl's bath? She asked him, already knowing the answer, but also knowing that he had to acknowledge that. No. Midoriya got out as he snuggled up to her, something she didn't mind, as she got the sense he was a tad touch starved. Then we have no problem. We can keep this just between the both of us, alright? She asked him as she rubbed circles around his back to keep him calm as they settled into a more comfortable position, their training long forgotten. As long as it's okay with you. Midori replied, back to normal, as he only now realized just how close the two of them were, which oddly enough he didn't mind, as being in her arms like this, he felt as safe and free to express himself as he did when he hugged his mother. After this, the two of them just sat there as she hummed some lullaby she had forgotten the words to while they stayed in the shade of the trees, enjoying the calm atmosphere before she realized that 40 minutes had gone by. With that in mind, and his insistence that he was much better now, they went back to it. After they noticed that their 3 hours were up, she stopped creating monsters for him as they too started to head back to the others. By the way, just curious. Pixie-bob started as they walked along, this time rather than lead him, the two walked side by side. Did you feel like you offended me that badly? I mean, I get reminded that I'm not in high school anymore all the time like when I renew my driving license. She couldn't help but ask, sure she made a big deal out of it, but it wasn't like she really cared all that much, why else would the other cats constantly poke fun at it? I just didn't want you to feel like you were anything less than what you are. Midoriya muttered as he looked towards his feet, his face starting to light up. Oh? Pixie-bob seemed to pick up on that, and now knowing why he was acting strange, she decided to see if she couldn't tease him a little bit. And what is that? Be honest. She heard him mutter something under his breath that wasn't good enough. I can't hear you, you're going to have to speak louder. She coaxed him to speak up, they were still a ways off from the rest of the class, so she would be the only one to hear her. An amazing person who goes out of the way to save people and make them feel safe. I didn't want you to feel any less than an angel. Midoriya said, as felt like the earth should swallow him up. In his embarrassment over such a confession, he missed how Pixie-bob froze, as her cheeks got a little rosy themselves. No one ever called me an angel, she thought to herself, as she felt her heart flutter a little at that. Oh my. She fanned her face before she grabbed him and pressed their faces together as she rubbed his cheek to hers as she hugged him. Oh, you are just the sweetest, aren't you? The girls must be fighting to get to you. She complimented him in turn as she let him go and watched with mirth as seemed to be struggling to stay conscious. Oh, okay. Midoriya got out, but she wasn't done. Oh, and before we get back, I have one last question. She asked him, to which he seemed to wonder what more she could want to know. Anything? Still, he was always willing to help people in any way that he could, so answering a simple question wasn't something he would refuse without good reason. Did you enjoy those dreams? The ones when you and I had some fun in the baths? She asked him, getting real close to him as she gave him a smile that she could see was having a very real effect on him as his mind seemed to buffer as he paused mid-step. You never know. If you work hard enough, you might just get the real thing, so keep it up, little kitty. I'll be waiting. She told him with a little giggle as she started to walk ahead of him, and now he knew that she was putting extra sway into her tail attachment and hips, which conveniently also let him notice that along with being very much in shape with a womanly figure to match Midnight, also had an ass that Mount Lady would be proud of. Either way, he didn't know how, but he had a feeling that this summer camp was going to be anything but normal for him. But really, was that any different from the rest of his life? Thanks for watching my video, and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic, link is in the description. See you next time, till then sayonara.